At exactly 7:15 on a rainy Tuesday morning, Daniel Brooks counted the money in his wallet for the third time. $23.46. That was everything he had until payday. He sighed quietly, folded the worn bills, and smiled at the little girl sitting across from him. Ready for school, sweetheart? His 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, grinned as she zipped up her backpack. Can we still get hot chocolate after my spelling test if I do well? Daniel's heart sank for just a second. He knew they couldn't afford it. Then he remembered something his late wife used to say. Never let a child carry an adult's worries. He smiled. If you ace that test, we'll celebrate. Sophie's eyes lit up. Really? Really? She hugged him tightly before grabbing his hand. Ever since Sophie's mother died 4 years earlier from a sudden brain aneurysm, Daniel had become both father and mother. He learned how to braid hair after watching dozens of online tutorials. He packed lunches with handwritten notes. Every Friday they had homemade pizza night, even if the toppings were simple. Life wasn't easy, but they always had each other. After dropping Sophie at school, Daniel stopped at a neighborhood cafe before heading to a construction interview across town. He only wanted the cheapest coffee available, nothing more. Inside, the cafe buzzed with morning commuters. Business people hurried through the line. College students typed on laptops. Daniel quietly waited his turn. When he reached the register, he smiled politely. "One small black coffee, please." The young cashier nodded. "That'll be $3.54. Daniel handed over a $5 bill. The cashier began counting his change. Before she could finish, a sharply dressed woman stepped out of the office behind the counter. She wore a tailored suit, expensive heels, and a silver name badge. Megan Collins, store manager. She frowned at Daniel. "You're holding up the line." "I'm sorry. I'm almost finished." She snatched the coins from the cashier's hand. Then, without warning, she tossed them onto the floor. The quarters rolled beneath nearby tables. Pennies scattered across the cafe. A few coins spun in circles before finally stopping. Megan folded her arms. "There. Pick it up." The room became silent. Daniel stared at the coins. For a moment he thought he had imagined what happened. "I'm sorry." She shrugged. "You obviously need every penny. So go ahead. Pick them up." Several customers looked away, embarrassed. Others watched without saying a word. The young cashier whispered, "Ma'am." Megan ignored her. Daniel slowly knelt onto the tile floor. Not because he accepted the humiliation, because those coins mattered. They represented tomorrow's bus fare, or part of Sophie's school lunch, or another loaf of bread. As he reached for a quarter beneath a chair, someone quietly spoke behind him. "Daddy." Daniel froze. He turned around. Standing in the doorway was Sophie, still wearing her backpack. Her teacher had called because she had accidentally left her spelling notebook in the car. Daniel had returned to drop it off. Instead, his daughter had witnessed everything. She hurried toward him. "Why are you on the floor?" Daniel forced a smile. "I dropped some change." Sophie looked around at the scattered coins, then at the manager. Children notice more than adults realize. She understood. Without saying a word, Sophie knelt beside her father. "I'll help." Together they gathered every coin. Neither complained. Neither argued. When they finished, Sophie carefully counted them into Daniel's hand. "Nothing's missing." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Thank you." Just as they turned to leave, a calm voice echoed through the cafe. "I'd like everyone to stay exactly where they are." A tall, elderly man stepped forward from a quiet corner table. Few customers had noticed him sitting there reading a newspaper. He folded it neatly, then removed a pair of glasses. Megan smiled politely. "Good morning, sir. I'm sorry you had to witness that." The man looked at her without smiling. "Oh, I witnessed far more than you realize." He reached into his pocket and produced a leather identification holder. When Megan opened it, the color drained from her face. The man wasn't an ordinary customer. He was Richard Lawson, the billionaire founder of the entire coffee company, and he had seen every second of what had just happened. The cafe fell into complete silence. Daniel had no idea that those few humiliating moments on the floor, and the dignity with which he handled them in front of his daughter, were about to change his life in ways he never could have imagined. The cafe became so quiet that the soft hum of the espresso machine sounded unusually loud. No one moved. No one spoke. Store manager Megan Collins stared at the leather identification holder in Richard Lawson's hand as if she were hoping it wasn't real. But it was. Richard Lawson, founder of the Lawson Coffee Company. The man whose photograph hung in every employee break room. The man whose values were printed inside every staff handbook. He slowly closed the identification case and slipped it back into his jacket. Then he looked around the room. I've owned this company for 28 years. I've opened hundreds of stores. I've trained thousands of employees. His voice remained calm. But I've never asked anyone to treat a customer the way I just witnessed. Megan swallowed hard. Mr. Lawson, I can explain. He raised one hand. No, I've already seen enough. He turned toward the young cashier. What happened? The cashier hesitated, glancing nervously at her manager. Richard gave her a reassuring smile. Tell me the truth. Taking a deep breath, she explained everything. How Daniel had politely ordered the least expensive coffee. How he had paid with exact change. How she had already counted the money before Megan walked over. And how the manager had deliberately thrown the coins onto the floor. Richard listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once. Thank you. Then he faced Daniel. I'm very sorry. Daniel shook his head. You don't owe me an apology. Richard looked at Sophie, who was still holding her father's hand. I believe I do. He crouched until he was at Sophie's eye level. What's your name? Sophie. You helped your dad pick up every coin. She nodded. My daddy works really hard. I know. Richard smiled gently. You're very lucky to have him. Sophie smiled back. I'm the lucky one. The simple answer touched everyone listening. Richard stood and turned toward the customers. I'd like to ask something. How many of you witnessed what happened? Nearly every hand in the cafe went up. Thank you. He looked back at Megan. Our company's mission begins with one sentence. He recited it from memory. Every guest deserves dignity, regardless of what they order or how they pay. He paused. You violated that promise. Megan's confident expression disappeared. I'm sorry. Richard nodded slowly. I believe you are. But apologies don't erase choices. He asked the regional director, who had arrived moments earlier after receiving an urgent call, to step forward. Effective immediately, Megan Collins is relieved of her managerial responsibilities, pending final review. The room remained silent. Megan lowered her head. She knew there was nothing she could say. Richard then turned back to Daniel. I understand you're on your way to a job interview. Daniel looked surprised. Yes. What kind of work? Construction. I've done maintenance, carpentry, and facility repairs for years. Richard smiled. So you solve problems. I try. Richard thought for a moment. Our company manages more than 300 cafes. They all require maintenance. They all require someone who understands hard work. He reached into his pocket and handed Daniel a business card. I'd like you to visit my office tomorrow. Daniel looked confused. I'm not looking for charity. Richard laughed softly. Neither am I. I'm looking for someone whose character my employees can learn from. The following afternoon, Daniel visited Lawson Coffee's headquarters. He expected a short meeting. Instead, Richard spent nearly 2 hours asking about his life. Not his resume. Not his education. His life. Daniel spoke about losing his wife, learning to braid Sophie's hair, working multiple jobs, never wanting his daughter to believe they were poor, even when money was tight. Richard listened carefully. Finally, he smiled. You remind me of my father. He taught me that success isn't measured by how many people work for you. It's measured by how many people feel respected because of you. Richard nodded. You won't receive any. You'll simply receive the opportunity you've earned. 6 months later, Daniel visited the same cafe where everything had happened. This time, he wasn't there as a customer. He was conducting a routine inspection. The young cashier still worked there. She smiled the moment she recognized him. You got the job. Daniel laughed. I guess I did. And Sophie? She got a perfect score on that spelling test. The cashier grinned. I knew she would. Before leaving, Daniel noticed a framed plaque hanging beside the entrance. It displayed the company's updated customer promise. At the bottom appeared one additional sentence. Respect costs nothing, but it can change someone's entire life. Richard had added it after that rainy Tuesday morning. Years later, Sophie would often tell friends about the day she found her father picking up coins from a cafe floor. Most expected the story to end with embarrassment. Instead, she always smiled and said, My dad taught me something much bigger than standing up for yourself. He taught me that no one can take away your dignity unless you hand it to them. Daniel never became wealthy enough to appear on magazine covers. He never sought fame. But everywhere he worked, people remembered the quiet man who treated janitors, cashiers, executives, and customers with exactly the same kindness. Because the greatest lesson from that morning wasn't that a billionaire changed one father's life. It was that true character is revealed in the moments when someone tries to humiliate you, and you choose compassion, integrity, and self-respect instead of anger. And in the end, those qualities proved far more valuable than the handful of coins that first fell onto the cafe floor.